Hi, welcome to another episode of So You Got a Gun. My name is Matt, and I have my co-host Alex with me tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some of the modifications that people make to their everyday carry guns. We're not going to get into some of the crazier things, just the basic stuff that people do kind of right out of the box. But first, we have a quick safety brief. So we're going to be talking about keeping your guns, storing your guns safely, responsibly. So you should always store your gun unloaded unless it's a gun that's in use. Okay, so we were just talking about this before the show started. My handguns that I use for self-defense are always they're always loaded, even if they're stored. Now, maybe my 30-30 lever action hunting rifle, when I store that, that's not loaded. So yeah, always store your guns unloaded until they're in use or unless they're in use. All right. So now that we've wrapped up our safety brief tonight, Alex, why don't you go ahead and get us moving on our first part of the night?
Sure. So the first thing I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit is the philosophy behind your guns. And the first thing I want to get out of the way is if you are very new to firearms and you're looking at it going, hey, I've got $500 and I want to do some upgrades to my guns. I know we're talking about upgrades, but I want to encourage you to use that to getting behind your gun a little bit more. Go to some training. Gun does in your hands. See what those sights do. Get used to that gun before you want to start throwing a bunch of modifications on it. You may like it right out of the box. So I'll kind of digress on that one. But one of the other philosophies I have that I hear a lot about that I ran across when I first started getting into firearms was you must not be a very good shot if you're adding a bunch of stuff to your gun. And I don't necessarily agree with that. It's kind of an old school mentality. And what I've said in the past and what I'll say again, you'll probably hear it a lot. If I can do something to my firearm that's going to give me that 0.01% better, faster, the better chance of survivability against a bad guy, I'm going to do that. So if that means I'm using a stippled grip or different sights or whatever that is so that I can get that gun in action faster to defend against the bad guy, that's what I'm going to do. So that's sort of my philosophy on it. Matt, you got a philosophy that you want to interject?
If I have something on my gun that's not working for me, and there's a better option, then I'll change it out for a better option. If that still doesn't work for me, then I'll switch to a different gun. For me, it's whatever helps me get the job done better. I mean, if that's at the range in a training class, whatever. There's no with all the options that are out there and available, especially now, especially in the last couple of years, there's no reason to be carrying a gun with little things that you absolutely just don't like. Everything can be modified now.
Yeah, right on. I don't think they make a part for everything, and if they don't make it, somebody can mill it, which is even nicer.
Right.
So the first section we're going to talk about as far as upgrades goes, we're looking at sights and kind of their idea, how they work, and the kinds that there are. So there are generally 3 types of steel sights on the market, which are the standard steel sights that you normally see on a firearm. Matt, you got something with steel sights that you can show?
Yeah. I don't know how well this is going to show up on my camera here, but these are replacement sights for my Glock 17. They're I don't think brand name matters tonight, but they're a little bit higher, a little bit taller than the factory sights, which I have some on one of these guns here. So that you can see that front sight is quite a bit shorter, and this rear sight is quite a bit taller here. I'm moving all over the place, but yeah, especially with the Glocks, the plastic sights, they'll work just fine until they don't, or until they break off. I've got those on a different carry gun of mine just to see how long they could go until they fell off. I've been carrying this gun for quite some time, and it's my typical carry gun, and it's starting to round off a little bit in the front here, in and out of the holster, but it still works.
That's great. So those are the standard steel sights, so the standard sights we're talking about. And the three basic ones that are on the market right now are blank steel sights that have a painted outline or possibly two white dots with a center white dot in the front. Usually those are stock sights that you find on the majority of firearms. The next one that we see very popular. Yep.
Oh, there we go.
Matt?
I don't know if you guys can see that real well.
Yep, those are your standard sights. Those are the ones on the Glock. A lot of them are a little bit different. Some of them are two dots in the back with one in the front. They're just depends on the gun that you're using. The next most popular one that we have are fiber optic sights. And those are sights that incorporate a fiber optic in the front, or in the back, or in the front and the back, or vice versa. And what those do is the fiber optic gathers light and focuses it into a dot that makes it more visible and easier to see. And then the third most popular is a tritium dot, which will glow at night. And tritium is a radioactive isotope that glows because it's disintegrating, I guess, in a way. So it emits a glow, and they'll glow for about 20 years before they go dim. They're pretty cool product. So, Matt, have you had any experience with the fiber optics at all? I don't use fiber optics. I use tritium for the most part.
I'm the same. I don't personally care too much for the fiber optics. It just looks like I'm hard on everything. Okay, like everything I own, I'm rough on it. They just look like something I'm going to break. Now they might be perfect for you, for anybody else. For me, they just nope. Don't use them.
Yeah, I carried a hybrid sight for a while. That was a fiber optic tritium hybrid, and that was a pretty nice setup. The positive side to tritiums and fiber optics is the light gathering principle behind them. So in low light or dim light, you'll be able to see your sights a little bit better. This is really nice if you're out shooting in a field, if you're out practicing on a flat field and you're wanting to target practice and it's kind of getting a little bit dim, or you happen to be inside where the lighting isn't that great. Those really pay off in those situations. One of the things that I kind of get concerned with is utilizing tritium or fiber optic to replace a light for night shooting. And I think that's something to consider if you're thinking that you can use a tritium sight in replace of being able to identify your target with a flashlight. Then we need to reevaluate that thinking process a little bit. The sights are there as they're an addition. They're there to help and assist, not be such as a primary, I guess, if that's the right way of putting it.
Yeah, I agree. They are so when you're under stress, if you are in the dark, you can punch your gun out in front of you and you have a reference point. I mean, that's how I see them. This may or may not be a good time to bring this up, but I know, Alex, you probably hear this as often as I do. Oh, I want to get some night sights for my gun. Well, that's cool, but understand the way the human eye works. The eye can only focus on one thing at a time. I mean, like focus on one thing. It's kind of like when you look at a screen, like in a screen door, you can look at a screen or you can look through the screen and see what's on the other side of it, right? Well, if you have, if it's dark and you've got closest to your eye, you've got two tritium vials that are bright. Then you've got another tritium vial out in front of you that's also bright. What does your eyeball want to focus on? The two dots that are close to your eye, or the one dot that's far away? I personally, my own preference is I like just the front sight to have the night sight, the tritium, and the rear sight to be just blacked out completely. I have, I don't know, two of the guns up here have that. And it works out really well for me because I have a reference point of where my gun is, and then I have something to focus on.
Yeah, I prefer the same methodology. I use a tritium fiber optic sight for my front, and then a claw blacked out rear sight that I really like, and it's a easy to focus on. You pull that gun up and you push it out, that front sight pops right out, and all you have to do is drop it down in line, and you get the nice right angles in the back, and you can squeeze a round off. It's very easy to pick up. The eye focuses on it very quickly. And I found when I first started shooting that having those two back sights, or even just the U, like the notch painted, was very distracting for me to try to catch and grab. One of the things that a lot of sights are being incorporated with now is a front ledge on the rear sight, or a claw that allows you to be able to use that sight as a racking mechanism for like one-handed manipulation, or if if you're not able to use one hand, you can rack it off a table or your pants. I really like that feature. That's something to consider when you're looking at sights. If you would prefer more of a rounded sight or a squared off sight that you might be able to utilize in a different way. Depends on how you're going to be training and the kind of situations you think you're going to be in. So that's sort of up to your situation. Matt, your 17 has a flat black back, like a claw set sight on it, doesn't it?
It does. And there it is. I don't know how well. It picks up really well. And that's great for the corner of a pocket, like you said, off a table, whatever. And that's, for whatever reason, if you're not able to use your other hand, for any thing you can think of. But yeah, that's what it's for. And it does work great.
Now, I've carried one like that for a couple of years. Have you ever had it snag on anything? You ever had any issues with it snagging? I know a lot of people talk about that. Oh, I want it rounded off so it doesn't snag. I never had any problems with it. Have you ever snagged it on stuff?
I've never had my gun snag on anything. Not even, not when I was trying to draw from concealment. I've never had it snag on anything unless I was purposely trying to make it snag.
Cool. Yeah, I've never really had an issue. I know that's come up a couple times with some of my students in CPL classes and such. Oh, I want it nice and rounded so it doesn't snag on stuff. It happens, but for the most part, I think you're pretty safe on not having that problem. So let's see here. I think I lost Matt there. He blacked out on me. So I'll show you guys mine. I have a red dot on my carry gun, and I'm not going to get into red dots too much, but what we're talking about is using this front lip to be able to manipulate the slide. If you have a smaller sight, they have those front claws. You can do the same thing with it. This is just larger, obviously, because it's a full optic that's on there. I'm not going to get into red dots. We're going to do a show about red dots at some point in time, but that's what I've been carrying for the last couple of weeks. So, well, it's actually been a couple of months now. It's been a great addition. I really like it. It's a little faster. Eventually, I'll have a double set of sights and the red dot. Now that I've been able to utilize it a few times and like it, then I'm going to be milling it in and have a set of sights put on there as well. So I have two options for shooting or not shooting. So, excuse me for one. Sorry, I had to cough there. I didn't want to blow up the mic. So I think that pretty much covers the majority of sights. There's a lot of things on the market out there as far as sight configuration goes. When you have, there are big dot sights that have different rears and different fronts, and some of them are triangular. Some of them have U notches as opposed to 90-degree square notches in the back. My biggest suggestion to pick one out is to go look around and see what you think. There can be some great ones out there. You might find one that's like, oh, this is the best one. I think this is great. I'm going to love it. I'm going to use it. I saw it on this gun. I shot it. It was wonderful. It's going to be personal preference a lot. The sights that I like probably aren't the sights that Matt likes. It's just going to be what works best with my eye, what works best with my focal plane. I have astigmatism, so sometimes that doesn't work well with some guns or some sights as far as others do. And if I'm wearing glasses, sometimes that messes with stuff, or if I have contacts in. So it could be, just sort of how things go. I'm not sure if Matt's back yet. Matt, you back? Nope. Okay, cool. So I haven't heard from him. Hopefully he gets back and we can continue talking about it. But yeah, my biggest suggestion is going to check on sites. Just find a store that's got a lot of them available and start going through and looking at them. You know, holding them up and looking at them and going, oh, this looks cool, or man, I really like the red, or I really like the orange, or whatever color really works well for your eye. Keep in mind some of those colors disappear in color. So if you have a red front and you have a house with red walls, like I have a red bathroom, that site may totally blank out in a red wall. Just kind of some food for thought on whether you're picking that out, to kind of think about your surroundings and your situation to see if that fits well in that particular surrounding and situation. So the next thing that we're going to talk about here. Matt's still not back yet. I don't think he is. Hey, Matt, if you're on audio, just drop out and see if you can come back in. I see your picture, but I don't see you, so I'm assuming you're... Yay! Let's see if we can get him back here. Dun, 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 dun. The next subject we're going to be talking about, I'll just keep on going here until he shows back up. If not, I'll run the show by myself, is barrels. This is another really common upgrade for the majority of people. They kind of think about it right off the bat. And I think upgrading barrels is sort of that's an upgrade that I would wait to do until you're very proficient with your firearm. I've heard a lot of guys talk about, oh, I'm gonna get a new barrel because I think that that's gonna make my accuracy better. Yeah, it can, for sure, but the majority of people, especially when they're just getting into it, are gonna have a hard time outshooting their stock barrel. So Matt's back, but you're crooked, Matt.
Okay, let me see what we can do here. Sorry, we had a technical difficulty here.
Hey,
I don't know what happened to my internet. I don't know what's going on here. I'm going to have to find a way to prop my cell phone up. This is wonderful stuff.
Technical difficulties.
You're not kidding. I don't know what I'm going to use to do that. There we go. It's going to have
Every
to do it
single
for now.
one of our viewers is going, oh, thank you, Matt's back.
Oh, God, sorry.
I don't have to hear Alex talk for 45 minutes.
I was like, oh, my God. Like, my computer just will not, nothing's connecting. Firefox, and like whatever Apple had, no idea. No clue.
It just pooped out on you.
It did.
It happens.
Okay. Well,
so I had just kind of...
We're talking about barrels, sounds like?
Yeah, I was going into barrels. So if you have anything on sites that you wanted to tie up on it, go ahead. If not, we can kind of go into barrels here.
Yeah, real quick about sights. I like a thinner front sight, so I have a little bit of space between my front post and then you've got your rear. I like to be able to see a little bit of light on either side of my front sight, just because it gives me a little bit more information. I can see what's happening. If you have a front sight that's filling in that whole gap between, in the gap of your rear sight, it just makes it very difficult to gather information from one shot to the next. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, think about this one next time you go to the range and start putting, holes in paper. Okay. What are we moving on to now? Triggers.
Barrels.
You did barrels, right?
Well, I did a little bit. We kind of got stuck when you came in the show again. So.
Oh, okay. Here's my take on barrels. I think it takes quite a long time and a whole lot of experience for you to get to the point to where you are going to benefit noticeably from an aftermarket barrel. Unless you're trying to be a 21 foot, 7 meter, 21 foot sniper, I don't think that you're going to see a lot of advantage unless, like I have Glocks, unless you take this is just the frame, a Glock 40 caliber, and you put a 9mm conversion barrel in it. Like, that was worth the money for me. Or you can do that with other stuff too, and that we don't need to get into all the minutia on what barrels and what guns can do that. But for me, that's the only time I can see, in my opinion, where it benefits me. If you want one because you've got to have the tin coated gold, whatever, cool guy barrel with a threaded end cap, good on you. If you got the money, do it.
Yeah, the only other thing, like you said, is if you need a threaded barrel because you're shooting a silencer or something like that, then I could see going that way because it serves a purpose. You're putting a silencer on there or you're putting a compensator on there. But other than that, I think stock barrels are pretty darn good barrels. And I would stick with them until they don't work anymore. So
Yeah, we know. I think we both know guys that have 20,000 plus rounds on a OEM barrel from Glock or Smith and Wesson M&Ps or whatever, and they haven't shot the barrels out of them. So, yeah, get one if you
I
want
think
one.
this
If you've
barrel's
got,
got about 9,000 rounds through it. And it's still just about as good as I can remember it being when I first got it. So
cool, very good.
all right, our next subject that we're going to go over was triggers and
Triggers.
trigger bar education.
Um, you know, typically, I think the trigger that comes in most of your, your typical, your more heavily bought guns, your more M&Ps, Glocks, SIGs, CZs. Typically, those triggers are pretty good. If you have a comfort issue with them, that's one thing, and you want to change out a trigger shoe. That's different. And a trigger shoe is actually what most people consider, as the trigger. This is just the trigger shoe. The mechanism is all inside of here. But I have found that I benefit greatly from a different trigger in my Glocks. I like it. After you get really tuned in with your gun, you start noticing some things about it that, if you change them, can either help you, improve your time, improve your shot placement, one shot to the next. But typically, factory triggers are, they're just fine. But comfort level is another issue.
Sure. I think most guns come with about a 5-pound trigger pull in them, depending on what you're getting. Revolvers are a little higher. Most polymer pistols are around 5 pounds.
Yeah, 5.5 I think is typical, and right around between 8 and 12, depending on the revolver. I mean, heck, even some of the semi-autos we have come with some of the Beretta 90. What is it, 90? Beretta 92. Some of those are between literally 8 and 12 pounds. So.
Yeah, there were some military standards that I think it was set pretty darn high for the military.
Right.
And then you got some guns that come out of New York police that they had like a 14-pound trigger in them as well. And occasionally you see Glocks with a 14-pound bar in them, which just startles me a little bit to think about pulling 14 pounds. But
right. And, I think it would be cool to demonstrate this, what happens. I'm going to over-exaggerate this, but we're going to you're going to watch the front of this. I'm just going to squeeze the gun really, really hard. You're going to see how much it moves in the front. See that? The front sight move. So the heavier your trigger is, the more pressure you have to put on the gun. I'm sorry, on the trigger. And if you don't have a good grip and you don't have good two-hand control of the gun, your front sight will move down and to the left or down and to the right, depending on if you're left or right-handed. The less you have to do that. Now, we don't want a trigger that's 3 pounds, but if you have 4.5, 5.5, which in my opinion, that's kind of a sweet spot to me, you can mitigate a lot of that front sight movement just by having a better weighted trigger mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed a lot of the aftermarket triggers also have like forward and back stops in them to reduce trigger travel forward and trigger travel back. A lot of that gets into personal preference. I have a forward and back stop in my gun that I stuck it in there and I messed with it a little bit when I first got it and kind of found a spot that I really liked, and I left it there. Um, the part that's a benefit to those type of things is it allows for faster follow up shots and cleaner shots because the trigger travel is much less. Like Matt was saying, if you're pressing really hard on a trigger to get it moved, your barrel has less stability. The gun left and right push and pull. The same thing with trigger travel. If you're having a shorter reset forward and backward, there's less chance of that gun moving left and right and up and down while you're trying to pull that trigger.
Right. And something else that's important is, for me anyway, I like to have a discernible trigger reset. I like to be able to hear it. I like to be able to feel it. So, and what that is, I'll demonstrate this, is so you can see, there I am. The trigger is going to snap to the rear. Now you're going to hear it come forward. That's right where it stopped, right there. Did you hear? I mean, hopefully you could hear that. Hopefully it picked up, and that's as far forward as your finger needs to go. You don't need to bring your finger any further forward anymore. Bring it any further forward is travel you have backwards. So it's just less. It's less time you have to take in between shots, and the less movement you have in your trigger, the less movement you have on your sights.
Exactly. There's a lot of different types of triggers out there. There's flat faces and curved and serrated. There's a ton of them, and that's a lot of the personal preference. Again, I've shot some flat faces. I've shot some curved triggers, and I've shot some weird ones that were reversed. It's kind of cool. I don't see them too often anymore, but when I first started looking at guns, there was some kind of crazy shaped ones. And I think it's personal preference. A big thing I would say to looking at upgrading your trigger and trigger bars is go online and look at the reviews that you see. There's a lot of different triggers out there, especially for the modular guns like the Smith & Wessons and Glocks, and go see what the reviews have to say. There's a few triggers out there that have bad reviews, and the reason that they're getting bad reviews is because they have a safety problem. So go check those out. Read the reviews of the trigger that you're looking at. Make sure that they're solid and that they don't have any safety issues, like the disconnect on the safety, it doesn't work correctly, or they're not drop safe or something like that. And what I mean by drop safe is when you if you took your gun and you dropped it on the floor, that the trigger wouldn't move and it wouldn't go bang. So that's what I mean by drop safe. Most you should be able to drop it, throw it across the floor, bang it against the wall, and it shouldn't go off. Some guns, they have some issues with that. Just read up on it and see what you can do to resolve that problem, or at least get one that's got good reviews. There's a ton of them out there, and usually the reviews are pretty darn honest, especially if they're from a reputable company. There's a lot of great guys out there that do some really phenomenal reviews and really lay it out. Go and look at those, read them, look at them on YouTube, look at them on the pages, read about them. Pick one you like and go with it.
I agree, man. You know, I think we'll have to. Hey, I'm back on my regular my computer. Fantastic. Let's see how long this lasts. I think we're going to talk about this on another show, but it's important to know that the information you're getting from some other YouTuber is good information. And then just really quickly, I want to give one thing, and we'll talk about this in the other show, but if you're watching a YouTube video on a specific product and you're told this is the greatest, best, end all be all, whatever, they probably work for the company. They may be sponsored by the company. They might just be a fan of it. You don't know, but be aware of the information that you're bringing into your brain pan. Okay, you see how many people feel the same way this guy, this chick feels about this given product.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I want to put out there is hopefully someday in the future, we'll be doing something where we're reviewing actual products and actually getting into that kind of stuff. And we're going to do our very best to be as upfront with you as possible when it comes to that. So if we have somebody that eventually sponsors us and says, hey, we want you to deal with our product, we're going to tell you that. We're going to say, hey, this is a product that we are sponsored by. We're somehow compensated for this. This is why we're sponsoring them. If we're not sponsored by them, we're going to tell you that we're not. And hey, this is why we like them. So we want to make sure that, you know, we are as honest and as open with you guys as possible when it comes to that kind of stuff. So what do you got, Matt? Anything after that? We're going to move on to the next one.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, it is very important to be open about that. You need to have transparency. If we end up being sponsored by a company, it's like, hey, we'll give you our opinion. It's kind of hard to review something that you're being paid by. You know, we'll tell you, you can give a rundown, but it's kind of hard to say, go buy this Master Blaster Whiz Bang, whatever. By the way, they're paying for bandwidth or something, you know. So,
all right. So our next subject, and I think our final one for the evening, is going to be frame modifications. So there's a lot of frame modifications out there, and I will tell you the story of my first frame modification. And I went to a training session that was very hot and very wet, and it was rainy and muddy and muggy. And when you have a firearm that is made of plastic and you add rain and wet, it's really hard to keep your hand on that gun. So after that mess of a day, I came home and I started looking at stippling. And at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of people doing that. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to do it myself. And that's what I did. But I found after that day of learning that a gun can be very slippery, that stippling my firearm really made a great improvement in my grip. And by stippling, I will kind of tell you what I mean here. So nice and clear. But I don't know if you can get a good picture of that there. All those little dots that are on there are stippling. And basically what they've done is they've melted into the grip of the gun to create a texture on there that is easier to grip. Oh, there we go. Looks pretty decent. And that's my original stippling job. It's not fancy, but the key is it works really well. It's like sandpaper, and that gun is grippy in all sorts of environments: cold, hot, sweaty, rainy, muddy, bloody. It works great in all of them. So, Matt, you got some stippled guns, don't you?
I do, and I actually did mine for a very similar reason, the bloody part. This is the first one I did, and you probably can't see that really well, but I live kind of I'm not in the sticks, but I'm surrounded by, I don't know, 50, 60 acres of woods, lots of deer, lots of other critters that like to eat deer. Long story short was my hands were covered in blood because I had a deer hanging in a tree I was cleaning, and I could literally hear coyotes jumping around, yelping and squawking, and they weren't too far away. And I had my son with me, so I brought him around behind me, and I drew my gun. And as my gun was coming out of the holster, in the back of my mind, I thought, oh my God, this is going to be hard to hold on to. And I just popped a couple rounds just to scare everything away. I mean, it was right out in front of me. I mean, I had a light out so I could see where I was putting bullets, but still, it was scary to feel the gun not be 100% in my control. Just that doubt in the back of my mind was enough for me to say, time to get a soldering iron, a wood burning kit. And, you know, spend the money. Even if you don't have an AR, spend the money and go buy some Magpul PMags. Now it's going to be a different consistency, from one material to the other, but it will give you an idea of how to do a pattern, how to break patterns up. Here's the other thing. Take your time. Take breaks. If you're going to stipple your frame, realize it's not going to be, you're not going to get it done in an hour. You're just not. There are some things to consider as well. I don't know if Alex did this with his, but this high up into the back strap, the beaver tail, leave that alone. If you get that all very, very aggressively stippled, it's going to tear up the web of your hand right in here and tear it up badly. If you notice any of the guns in the gun shops, or even the factory guns, the factory stippling stops right before it gets into the web of the hand. I don't know how well you guys could see that, but yeah, there it is. There's a reason for that. So something else with frame modifications, if you want to undercut your trigger so you can get your hand, you can get really high up into the gun, into the frame. And then I undercut my trigger guard just a little bit on this one, and it allows me to get my support hand just a little bit more where I want it. When you do that, if you're going to use some kind of rotary tool or a Dremel, make sure you can adjust your speed. Put this in a vise, in a bench vise, cover the teeth on both ends, put this in the bench vise, go slow, take this out and fit it. Check it often. Once you take off some material, take the frame out and check it. How does this feel? How does that feel? Do I have hot spots? Once you take stuff off, you can't put it back on. You can slowly remove a little at a time. So this is definitely a measure twice, cut once, bud type thing. Okay. And once it's ruined, it's ruined. And this is the part that's got the serial numbers. This is the part that's considered the firearm. So you don't want to ruin this.
Okay, I got a funny story. So we're gonna go back to my monstrosity of my stippling job. And can you see all the stippling up underneath here? If you look real closely, around here, there's a smooth spot. So I'm sitting in my very first MDFI class with a bleeding hand because I've shot 100 rounds and my knuckles are bleeding because the stippling has ripped them apart. And I'm on break with a Swiss Army knife carving the stippling off the back of my beaver tail. Trek walks over and just shakes his head and walks away.
Darn new guys.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Dude, I could see him. Boonie hat folded up, thing in the back, glasses.
Cigar.
Yeah.
That was exactly it, too.
I cannot wait. I'm going to call him tomorrow and ask him about it.
Oh, I hope he remembers.
Okay. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? The frame modification stuff?
If you got the money, have a professional do it.
Agreed.
There are some things when you get into stippling that you can go bad, and especially when it comes to stippling and heating up that magwell, because you can flex that magwell out of place, and then all of a sudden your magazines jam. What I've heard in the past is to put a couple of wraps of tape around your magazines and slide them in there, and then that way when you're pushing on it, you won't push too far down and damage that magwell. But when it comes to a lot of this gunsmithing stuff, having a professional do it is probably the most reliable way. There's a lot of great professional stipplers out there. There's a lot of great professional guys that can do cut on your gun. They know how deep to cut. They know where to cut. They warranty their work, so if something gets screwed up, they fix it. If you can afford it, I would suggest using a professional guy. I don't have anybody that I'm a fan of particularly. There's a lot of great guys out there. I've seen some excellent work. and they're all run about the same price. So I can't really suggest anybody off the top of my head that's better than one another. But there are some companies out there doing laser engraving as well. I felt some of that stuff. It feels great. It looks good. Go for it and see. But when it comes to modifying, even putting your sights on, installing new triggers, having a professional do that stuff, if you can, is well worth it. For one, for putting sights on, they're going to make sure the sights are square. They're going to make sure they're correct left and right, and so on. For putting triggers and stuff in, for most polymer pistols, triggers are drop-in. You push out 2 pins and you can put a new one in. They're pretty easy. But the one thing that I think is important with a gunsmith is they might see something that's not normal, that you don't know is not normal. So that's another suggestion, is just to kind of, let the professionals do their jobs if you can afford it. A lot of this stuff, you can find plenty of YouTube videos on how to do it yourself. It's kind of up to you. But I think that's pretty much most of my input on frame mods. It kind of rolls down to what you think feels good and works for you and improves what you're doing. And I guess that's the big key point to all of this stuff, is does it help you somehow? Does it give you a bonus? Does it give you that 0.01% better? Does it do that? If it doesn't do that, then I don't see a reason in doing the modification.
I think it's, you touched on this, but I think it's important to note that you are changing you're changing the frame, you're changing the gun. So Alex, when you talked about having somebody else do this, a professional, make sure it's a professional doing this, not like, I wouldn't take my gun to a guy that, also fixes weed whackers and chainsaws because I need some gunsmithing work done. Like, have somebody that you can get on social media or something, and you can look at their work, because if you don't, what you're going to get is your frame back possibly is going to look like a dog chewed on it, instead of, what you actually paid for, which is, I did this myself, realizing it was going to take a long time. I had plenty of time to do it. No kids, at the house say, "Dad, I need this, mom's blah, blah, blah." I didn't have any of that going on. Okay. Make sure that you realize, again, that's not going to happen in an hour. So if you can pay to ship it off, have somebody else do it, that's great, do it. But if you get online, look, you're going to see people that have horror stories of their gun comes back, like I said, looks like a black lab stippled it for them. The other thing it's important to remember is you're changing the gun, right? So that resale value, like if you get to a point like, I don't like this gun, I want to sell it, well, good luck selling it unless it's professionally done. If you do it at home, you can forget selling that gun. Okay. And if you do, you're going to get next to nothing for it. So just realize that any resale that you might have, it's a wash. And all of these things, whether it's, a new barrel, new sights, trigger connectors, shoes, whatever, none of this stuff is going to help you shoot better unless you can already shoot well. None of these things are like a magic talisman. They're not going to, put bullets in one hole. If you're at 21 feet and your target looks like a shotgun blast, none of these things, not one of them, are going to help make your shooting better. What you probably need to do is invest a couple, maybe $200 to $300 for 1,000 rounds of bulk ammunition, and set aside some time to go to the range. Maybe get some professional instruction on just accuracy drills, things like that, before you start spending $200 on a barrel, $150 on sights, whatever else. Oh, one other thing. We talked about the holsters and belts in our last show, but something I wanted to mention is some of these companies are selling their guns. Oh, it comes with the holster and it comes with a mag carrier. Those things are garbage. Throw those away. Okay. Those are just intended to get somebody who is maybe not very educated, Or maybe this is their first handgun to say, oh, God, it already comes with stuff I was going to buy anyway. They're an enticement, not an improvement. So throw those in the garbage and get something that is actually meant to carry your gun, your magazines on your person.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all really good points. If I were to look at a new person buying a firearm and advice I could give them when it comes to doing some of these upgrades is, get a good gun, get a good belt, get a good holster, go get lots of training, and then let's talk about these extras that you want to put on your gun. Then come to me and say, hey, I was at this class and I really didn't like the way my sights were performing. I couldn't see them very well, or whatever. Cool. Then let's talk about sights. Or, man, I went to this class and it was wet and muddy and I couldn't hold on to my gun. Cool. Let's talk about stippling. But conquer those things that are really needed first, then worry about some of these extras later. Because like Matt said, these aren't a magic talisman. They're not going to make you all of a sudden be top shot. And in some cases, they might make it worse. If you have a profound problem where you're doing the same thing over and over again, and you put a lighter trigger in, or you put a different barrel or a different sight, you may see that be worse than it was when you started. So it may change it to the bad side of things as well. Conquer the stuff that you have first, and then let's worry about the extras.
Yeah, I agree. If you're a right-handed person and you think something's wrong with your sights because your gun shoots low left a lot, let me tell you, it's not your sights. And if you're left-handed like me, and your gun is just shooting low and to the right, again, it's not your sights. It's you. Sorry, did I leave that part out? It's you.
It's just because you're wrong-handed, that's all.
Well, yeah, I know. I've been living with it for 37 years, man.
Oh, man. Well, I think that pretty much ties it up, man. I don't have anything else to kind of go along with this. I think at some point we'll get into these subjects more deeply. But for now, I think that covers the majority of stuff. I don't really have much more to bring into the conversation. So what do you got? You got anything extra?
No, I don't. I think we covered the heavy hitters, the ones that people are they want to do right away as soon as they get their gun. And I want you guys out there to realize, well, this is what when you replace A, B, C, X, Y, Z, this is what your focus is. This is what the outcome should be. This is why you should be doing it. If this isn't the reason you're doing it, then you're probably wrong. Maybe you're wasting money. I don't know. Again, if you're new to shooting, these things, you can't quantify right away whether it was money well spent or not. So see how you do with your gun when you buy it, and then make these little adjustments over time. But hey, if you just gotta have it, you gotta have it. And I'm not going to tell you not to buy stuff, because I like buying stuff. Makes me happy. And who doesn't like buying gun stuff?
Super Blammo 1000. It's mine.
Dude, my birthday was Cyber Monday. Yeah. I bought stuff.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, thanks, man. I think once you're past 25 and your insurance goes down and you're for your car, I think it's just more gray hair in the beard.
Yeah, that's the truth of it too. So I just stopped counting birthday.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks. Is that a new flannel? Cool. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week for another show. I'm not really sure what we're going to cover yet for next week, but we have been talking about getting some guests on and maybe going out to a machine shop and seeing some slide work done. So we'll have to see how that goes and see what happens. So we'll see you next week. That's all for us. Thank you for watching. So you got a gun.
Peace.
Peace.